Now, normally I don't condone cyberbullying. And today is no exception, because this game is essentially me getting cyberbullied for over half an hour. This is the most direct example of holding the front line that I've had in Beyond All Reason. Was an incredibly, like many games, a very frustrating but rewarding, yet kind of alternatively and also simultaneously difficult experience. So we're on the map Riverrun, which I wonder why it's called that, and what the game is going to boil down to, and what it usually boils down to on the front line, especially when you're not on the sides here, is simply surviving. That's it. Surviving. Just trying to live for long enough for players on the other sides of the map to carry for you. So I do have, just to start things out, we got Shocks, who is by far the highest ranked player in the game. So most of the focus will be on having him survive and break through. Now, I'm not going to get too many opportunities. Of course, the other team has plenty of top tier, or at least high level players. The matchmaking system, such as it is, balances that out. So they have an approximately similar level of players. Anyways, I hope you guys are enjoying these commentaries. This is just going to be me minimizing damage and trying to hold the line for most of the game. I don't have a big carry strategy on this one. I don't have, like, some super enlightened idea of how to play. It's just how to not die for as long as possible. Becoming a pork, or a porcupine, which I've learned is the term for it. So if you guys have been enjoying, if you haven't yet, be awesome. Like and subscribe. So many of you have subbed over just the last month or two. So hopefully you're enjoying. I always look to give you the best RTS content, no matter what that looks like. So apparently, yeah, that's good to know. We're already focusing on this. But starting with the bot lab, it's important. This map has very little metal. 1.6 is definitely on the lower side. Might be the lowest of the commonly played maps with metal extractors. So you really have to get a lot of them, and they're quite well spread out. As just letting people argue. But my job is going to be to hold as much of this kind of peninsula area as possible. Start with a bot lab. The starting box starts on the high ground. And I'm just building a couple constructors. Constructors, I've come around to the idea of constructors being better than construction turrets usually. At least in the early game, if possible. I think my bot lab is backwards. It should be facing the other way if I want to send units out. So that's not a particularly... It looks like every time I build a grunt, genius. Yeah, I just built it the wrong direction. But getting out to the front line and holding it is so the flanks can crush through. This map does have kind of a back line. Not all maps do, but it's kind of like a half and half, where the back line should be filling in. Like, in my opinion, this player should be headed up over to this area. This player supports up to here. So, and then my job in front there. But it does get... almost all bots can run by through the river. The river's very shallow, who would have thought? So pretty much any unit can run by any part of the map, which makes things very difficult if you don't have enough people at the front. So my goal is to use radar. I'm going to stay on my camera for a bit. Use radar to kind of minimize that sort of damage, while, of course, doing what I can on the other side. I think the first priority is finding out, one, how many players are going to get aggressive. You can usually tell pretty early on. Like, at this point, 1, 2, 3 players on the line, which is not particularly unique. But push up. Yes, I believe in this game I have a tendency to tell my teammates to, how do I put it nicely? Don't be a coward. Just sitting back with your commander is the strongest defense and builder you have. in the early game. So unless you're going to sacrifice your commander for that 2,000 metal, your best opportunity is to use it to hold some ground before you have to build a whole lot of units to do the same thing. Now, in a more choke point-oriented map, I think you can rely on static defense, and you still do want some light laser turrets and stuff like that. But the front is simply so open and wide here that I find it a less than ideal choice most of the time. So, for the economy, in the early game, it's pretty much, it's a wind map. The average wind speed is 14, so getting as many wind turbines as possible. Very clearly, there is a geothermal plant on the high ground there, which is going to become pretty relevant later on, because Cortex, which I'm playing, has the ability to build the Cerberus, which turns your geothermal plant into a big artillery piece at the cost of getting a lot less energy out of it. But it turns what could be a massive liability into part of your defense, which I decide on doing later on. So those are a combination, I believe those are Blitz tanks. I actually want to take a click on them. Yes, Blitz tanks from Armada, which are quite good against grunts. They don't cost that much more either, is one of the relevant parts. If they can get on top of the grunts, which they do pretty easily because they are quite fast. I believe they're faster. Yeah, they're about 15 speed faster than grunts. So they can punch through relatively easily against lines of just grunts. Which, I mean, that's to be accepted. As long as I have enough defenses on the high ground here, I'm feeling okay. The real issue is, at the end of the day, when you're defending against multiple players, there's going to be a give and take. The idea is to make yourself look a lot stronger than you are. Sun Tzu said something about that at some point. The idea is that I keep moving the commander back and forth, so that way players feel like they have to commit a lot of units to get through. And there's going to be, over to the north side, some rockets, some artillery. We got some just basic infantry here. Meanwhile, the team... Those are two different team players. Okay, they're in range of each other, but only just. At this, I'm constantly checking to see if anybody's breaking through anywhere. I mean, besides my zone. There you go, on my camera. I'm like, okay, well, there are 3 players here. Everybody's been in this situation. Some people handle it better than others. There are 3 players here, so, in case anybody wants to do anything anywhere else, that'd be amazing. Yeah, I got the geothermal at this point. That means also some metal converters, because you're not going to be able to hold on to too many of the metal extractors. Ah, looks like the spectators chimed in. Not very nice. For some reason, we can see the spectator pings on the replay. I mean, I guess that's cool. But interesting to see the commentary. But I just resigned myself to defending, ideally, the high ground, of course, and then adding some artillery, which I rarely build the basic artillery, like the tier 1 artillery. Let's take a look at it. Because it's 1,300 metal, the agitator, and indeed it does agitate anyone nearby, but it can be quite good in a stalemate or a choke point situation, but 1,300 metal is about almost half of your tier 2 lab. So the thought process here is it's going to make assaulting this area, doesn't have that much range, but assaulting at least my core area a little more difficult. And well, I just need to stay alive. Yeah, it appears something happening up north. A lot of newer players discover the transfer unit button and then decide that the better players on the team should just use their units. I think it's very important not to get in the habit of just giving a, quote, better player units. but instead using them productively yourself. Because as one of the recipients of those units much of the time, it really does throw off kind of your... unless they ask for them or it's kind of worked out beforehand, it does throw off your rhythm. Like, you have a certain amount of units. You might think just having 20 more grunts is good, but if you knew you would have 20 more grunts, you probably would have built a lot more economy. So that way, later on, you could build even more units. So just handing units to your teammate is not really a solution. It is instead, well, you know what else isn't a solution? Accidentally building 5 anti-air turrets instead of metal converters. I hit the wrong hotkey on the build grid. Because your teammate has other things to worry about. Bit of D-gun action. I wouldn't mind 1 anti-air turret, I think, but the hotkey is very similar. I believe it's X for combat, and then A for the anti-air, and Z and A for the metal converters, which I screw up sometime. There's so much metal on the ground right now, though. Alright, let's see. 3,000 metal, if I can just get a hold of it. Anyways, I was ranting. Yeah, just handing units to your teammates is definitely not the best use of resources on either front. Is what I was getting at. Because if I knew you were going to give me... I'm just talking from my perspective. If I knew you were going to give me 20 grunts, I would have built economy instead of 20 more grunts. And if you weren't going to use 20 grunts, you probably should have done that. Either way. And that could have paid for some more advanced solar, another construction turret, stuff like that. But in this scenario, I'm using my res bots to not so much res as reclaim, because I would love to res. I think it's always better. Almost, okay, 90% of the time it's better to resurrect units than it is to reclaim them. But with the big stipulation of it takes way longer, like probably 5 or 6 times as long, and you don't get metal. It just takes power. So it's kind of like that last situation we were talking about. Resurrect takes power. So the resurrect bots can bring that unit back to life at low HP, and then they have to spend more power to repair it. Which, for many units, especially like if I could get a hold of medium tanks or something, would be great. But in this scenario, I don't know how long I have before, and I use that extra metal on the ground. And there are some scenarios where, like, blitz tanks are great, but I probably wouldn't care too much about having blitz tanks on defense. But, so my teammate loses his commander, because he did wander a little far up, which could be a blessing in disguise. As he did end up losing it in a relatively defensible location. So I kind of send everyone, including my own commander, to deal with it. And I use the metal from all this reclaim. Not the best spot. Damn spectators criticizing. Well, I don't have too many options for tier 2 here. I don't like having everything up there, but I am very much stuck in this scenario. I do manage to get most of the metal off the ground. So at this point, I'm just thinking about how do I survive the next minute or two. And the answer here is getting a little more metal, using some of the Twitchers. I really like the construction. The Twitchers are the Cortex construction engineer. You got the console as armada off the vehicles, and also the butcher. Not the butcher, the butler is the repair bot off the bot lab. It doesn't construct as much, but it can assist with some build power. So, at this point, because I went tier 2, I did kind of stop building units, but I do have some of the static defenses. Oof, losing some of the res bonds. If I built enough defenses on the high ground to make it at least very difficult to push up there, and I can easily start building the tier 2 unit composition. Ah, yes. So, do what most people do when someone pings that much, which is just ignore them. Even though they might be right at some point, you just start tuning it out. But the tier 2, okay. I'm building a okay. The Cerberus, the geothermal plasma battery. Honestly, in many scenarios, I would think there are a few maps where the geothermals are in clearly great spots. On a high ground hill, the Cerberus, which has quite a, you can see the radius here, it can serve as a whole lot of artillery support. And at this stage where I'm constantly getting pushback, like you look at the state of the game, Shox is having to handle essentially 1v2. This lane is okay, but Magenta over here keeps moving it. So I end up having to reclaim my teammates' reclaim bots until they wander into the beamer in order to deal with that. I notice the northern side is going pretty okay. They've pushed pretty far. But I'll be honest, during the game, I'm barely, like, I'm really trying to manage my economy and getting any economy, essentially, while still not dying to, essentially, 3 players constantly pushing in. It is at some point, like, I'm just trusting that at some point somebody will break through, because you can't, like, I'd say there are 2 main frontline roles, which are defense and offense. I was trying to be clever than that. But the mid lanes, for the most part, are just, if a breakthrough happens there, the game's pretty over anyways. Because it really shouldn't, because your teammates can collapse from either side. And it's being in any of the centralized lanes. Looks like he sacrifices Commander for metal over there. Being in any of the centralized lanes means that you are exposing yourself to being attacked on both sides. And unlike like in StarCraft, where units can just move so fast anywhere, there is a physical time, especially for the higher tech units, to move around. And you simply can't support your teammates on the other side of the map without something like aircraft, which does end up becoming relevant. So at this point, I'm starting to add... it's impossible for me to, at least relatively difficult for me to realize how little they have on the other side of the island. I keep setting up radar and seeing all these dots and seeing 2 players of dots when my unit count can be measured in, like, essentially at this point I have less than 20 army units. I've been relying on how difficult it's been to break through to keep them from attacking for a while. It does seem like, in this hindsight perspective, I very likely could have put some more pressure on them. Just looking from the replay perspective. But also, since I'm holding essentially the entire center, I don't want to risk the other players collapsing on me and me breaking entirely. So what I'm constantly looking at is, like, do my teammates have okay energy? Like, are they building up? I look back at Shox's base. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, at least he has a tier 2 geothermal plant. Because most of it we're relying on Shox to push through here. And that is the role of the mid lane, for the most part, is hold and don't put any undue pressure on the carry players. I do like to be a carry player myself sometimes, but sometimes you just end up... What in the hell? What is this man doing? He's sending out a bunch of tier 1 vehicles to try to draw artillery fire from the Sheldons. This is your typical Cortex mid-game, by the way. The Fiends, which can move quite quickly and melt tier 1 units. Oh, I'm glad that some of the spectators agree. And then the Sheldons, which don't hit very hard individually, but are quite cheap and move pretty quickly. So the Fiends cover them from getting essentially zerged, and then the Sheldons are able to hit from afar and start chipping away at any units. And then we got the Twitchers mixed in there, throwing a few Sumos in the mix, which are definitely a stronger frontline unit. So I'm just taking some time to point this out. We got some of the Mauser artillery tanks here, but artillery tanks do suffer from the issue of having to be facing forward. Most vehicles, besides like regular tanks that have a turret on the top, do have to be facing in the direction they're attacking. So that's where the bots have an advantage. Even though the Mausers do have a significant DPS advantage. And I believe they have slightly more range than the Sheldons. Yeah, Sheldons have 850 range. And a grand total of 69 DPS. Nice, but 85 DPS and 940 range on the Mausers. Of course, slightly more expensive, and have to be facing that direction. So overall, harder to use than the Sheldons. So I've been kind of chilling. I've finally gotten to the point where I have the economy to build up a decent battle group, which is going to be Fiends, Sheldons, and I put down a ton of, and by a ton I mean at least like half a dozen perimeter cameras. I think some of them did get taken out. But the cloaked cameras can be laid down by the Twitchers, or construction bots, or even the commander. So you can use those in order to see units coming and provide that extra vision, because radar is likely going to be taken out and it's vulnerable to being jammed. So the cameras actually, as you can see, just straight up tell what units are where. And also with radar, once one of the radar dots is spotted by vision, which includes cameras, it'll actually show the icon even if the unit goes back into the radar area. You can see there where it'll show, oh, it's that unit. So at this stage, I have built one of the Gauss cannons. Every once in a while I zoom out like, am I going to get help anytime soon? And the answer usually, probably not. So, adding some spy bots in. We've talked about spy bots, the Spectres here for Cortex. The idea being that even if I can't take advantage of the spy bot for the EMP, it can just spy and create vision. Which, the vision of the ground units is usually relatively short. There's an EMP. Doesn't do a huge amount, but it definitely creates a little more fear, and getting any of those artillery tanks is a pretty big deal as well. I just keep moving around a whole bunch of those, some of the frontline units, because a lot of artillery is relatively inaccurate. So if you can draw its fire, and then just kind of wiggle around a bit there, especially if it's only using radar and it isn't using vision, it's likely many of the shots will miss. And you can kind of minimize the damage. So at this stage, I'm very much trying to... I'm at only 800 energy, which is not much in the scheme of things. You see some players on the team with 2, 3, 4K energy, but I've pretty much... I'm just making myself the biggest thorn, the most difficult shell here. Because I'm still dealing with a push, and I've confirmed that at least 2 players are focused on a ground army. So that means I'm pulling my weight. Bad Bot over here is helping me out. Similar unit composition he's got as well. Flynn is down there, also existing. But yeah, as you can see here, the Spy Bot's always offering potentially an opportunity to sneak in. And being able to deal with that artillery in any way is a huge deal. You can shift right click if you have set, like if you watch my settings video, you can see right click as designated target. So what happens is it's kind of a smart targeting. So in SC2, if you right click on a unit, your units will move towards it so they can attack. And beyond all reason, most units can attack while moving. Many of them can attack at any angle. So what happens is when you select a designated target, the units will keep attacking anything in range, and once they move into range of the target, they will fire at it. You can also do like shift right click, stuff like that. And that is what I was using there. So that way you don't accidentally move command into the enemy army, but you can set priority targets. This is very helpful, especially against the stronger units in the later game. Another quick check on how devastated my team is. Yeah, when I see that many grunts showing up, I'm wondering what's happened, because that guy's been on tier 2 for quite a while. Unfortunately, he's going out of my jurisdiction now. So, that means I've been successful, by the way, is, if he's looking for another target, I've been too difficult for him to handle. And that means, to me, that I can spend a little bit more time on a macro turn, essentially. And I really do need to focus, like, I'm not even at 1,000 energy yet, which I think there were definitely some opportunities to build up my economy a little better, but still most of my job is just making sure it is incredibly difficult for them to make any progress in the center line, because I really, like, it's very important that the flanks focus on their lanes, essentially. Because I noticed, there you hear that, the Cerberus is not particularly accurate, but it has amazing, like many things in the game, has actually incredible sound design. It's very intimidating. And that's part of the key, to be honest. Alright, and you see over there, are those some bull tanks? The strongest tier 2 tank, the bull, well, I guess besides the Tsar. But the Tsar is really, the Cortex Tsar is more like a mounted artillery, or at least, it isn't, I don't really consider it a tank. It's more like a slightly mobile turret, because it's incredibly expensive, it's huge, and it's so slow. The bull is the unit that feels the most like a tank to me. There's also Tiger tanks for Cortex, but they're a little on the weaker side compared to the bull. They're very strong, but the bull is just really embodies the tank. Probably one of my favorite Armada units. It's just, I do really feel that Cortex with the bot lab early on has so many options. So this is some strategical, this is a 102 IQ play. So I focus my forces up to the north side because I see my teammate is under fire, which baits the pink player in, so that way I can land an EMP on all those tanks because he's going to save his teammate. And then I miss the spy bot up there. I catch it at the last second, but I don't get the EMP, unfortunately. So I turn what could have been a great shutdown of both flanks into still a victory. Like, I knew I wouldn't take damage from the south, but I've successfully got their attention back on me, which is, again, most of my job. That is a mistake. That bot lab there. I think I meant to build, like, a construction turret or something. Oh yeah, at this stage, once again, the job is to live. My teammate has some fat boys. Unfortunately, fat boys are what I like to call friendly fire machines, because their most likely thing they're going to do is fire at like a tier 1 unit into the middle of everything you own. At least that's my experience. Though they do look and feel very cool. I wish they were more usable. But for Armada, I'd much rather have the snipers as a strong backline unit. There's that. Cerberus. The sheer amount of artillery from the high ground. It's not there to kill, it's a deterrent, essentially. Knowing that much artillery is there makes it intimidating for the other team to push into. Yeah, my teammate... Wait, was that my commander? No, my commander's in the back line building more metal converters. Energy converters. As I build a very optimistic fusion reactor. I think it's important not to be intimidated into building all your fusion reactors in one explosive corner, though. Like, a lot of players will do that. And it makes for a nice fireworks display when, like, 2 units get through, but I think the decent, especially in the front line, just a decent fusion reactors, like the tier 1 reactors, they explode, but the chain reaction won't blow up your whole base. Oof, that spy bot was a bit greedy. I'm trying to shark back and forth here. Just one good one would be great here. Just getting the vision is important too, because if you look on the other side, oh my god, what is wrong with, this madman is using the spring cam, like with the camera tilting. That's crazy. I like it, but, like, I could never do this. What an absolute and it does look, yeah, I think it's good to look from this perspective, though. And now, what about this guy? More conventional perspective, but from the other side, there's not much. Like, you don't know exactly how much is behind there. The idea is, every time you come forward, there's so much artillery and static defense that even if you can see it, you know there's more behind it. So, essentially, that's what I'm relying on. So now I believe I just started a tier 1 lab. The idea is to be able to get, I at some point salvaged or reclaimed my tier 1 lab. Trying to add some cameras here, just to keep that vision up. Teammate has sprinters. A lot of people think sprinters, which are very fast with like a submachine gun, they think of them as kind of an equivalent to the Fiend that Cortex has. They're not. They are not. Sprinters do not fight. They cost almost as much as a Fiend, but they are not fighting units. They have 690 HP. Compare that to... Does anyone have a Fiend around? A Fiend has 1,000. And the Fiend is much better at clearing. The Sprinters are mostly for running past. There should be almost no scenario where you find yourself using a Sprinter in an actual fight. A fight that they could lose. So... But at this stage, the flanks have held. I've added, I want to say I've added some anti-air. Looks like my team has some anti-air here, but the spy bot's still giving vision. I'm trying to reclaim as much as I can without drawing the attention. And there are some tier 1 units which may reveal the Spectre there. So I gotta keep moving it around. The idea is to grab as much on that reclaim, which is really helping out my meta. Also, I have that tier 1 lab in the back line, which is for some unit spam. That tier 1, like making a bunch of grunts, maybe res bots if needed, but in order to distract the artillery, essentially. You'll see a lot of that in the later game. And there's a lot of checking how bad is the rest of the game going. At some point, the spy bots are important just to do their jobs. I believe I want to build a constructor out here in order to eventually, like I'm feeling with 3K energy, you have enough to potentially get aircraft added in, which is another part, like both for fighter screens and potentially shurikens, which are the EMP stoners, the air EMP units that can do some spot defense. Juno comes in, the anti-radar / anti-scout missile. It does have, I want to point out, the Juno has global range, or at least so much range you can just put it anywhere on the map. So I see a lot of players putting the Juno at the front. Most missile launchers have a relatively limited range, but not the Juno. It can fire pretty much anywhere. At this point, I've finally built up between all the reclaim. I've now actually maxed out on metal, which is an exciting yet surprising place to be. And the late game for me still looks like a whole lot of this mid-game tier 2 bot lab. I don't think at any point in the near future I'm going to get an experimental gantry. Because I simply am going to struggle with the economy. Then we see some atomic bombers up there. So, yeah, the spy bot's still hanging out. Gonna build some reactors behind the mountain. need fighters, they say, because of course atomic bombers are not good for most people's health. The fighters will chase them down, which shows there's not very much anti-air at all, besides enemy fighting. I really do like, it's very cinematic. I'm gonna go to, when the fighters clash on each side, it looks very cool. Just shooting each other out of the sky, especially when there's bombers behind it and stuff like that. But they kind of just slice into each other, and they start falling out of the sky. Most of the time they don't explode, but instead fall to the ground. And technically the crashes do damage as well. Alright, so finally, I managed to get a spy bot there. Finally, we're pushing back, because we saw there was very limited anti-air. And at this point, maybe we can actually push through. Spy bots helping to lead the charge. Got an EMP on some of the turrets there as well. I'm not sure if the spy bots can EMP the commander, but I'm not going to give it a shot. Meanwhile, experimental gantry right at the front. The atomic bombers they are very tanky, so you can EMP production buildings, which does, to my understanding, stop their production. Not 100%, but it does show the EMP effect, so I'm assuming that's what it does. So here we're gonna see a bit of a friendly fire disaster from the Fat Boys. They do a huge amount of damage, but when they fire at close range... Let's take a look at the Fat Boy stats here. Yeah, they do a massive, what is it, 1,600 damage cannon. Or... I never know how to read these numbers. A 7-second reload. That might not be the right number. I'm not actually sure. 16,000. I have a lot of HP as well, but are very prone to getting flanked. So we actually finally pushed through. After all this time, and all this struggle, I'll tell you, it felt like a lot longer for me. Especially fighting in the early game. But the fact we're pushing through on multiple fronts. And then I see this. I zoom in and I see the great wind farm of Flynn. Flynn, who I'm not entirely sure knows what a fusion reactor is, as he's still learning. At some point, he's got 16K, he definitely has a fusion reactor, right? Is it clean wind energy? The range is 32,000 on the Juno, by the way, which I'm reasonably sure covers the entire map, no matter what. That's larger than any map in the pool. Wow. He has 16,000 energy on just wind turbine. Well. The snipers. I've always been heavily amused by the snipers, who... It looks like their arm is the gun, or are they holding a gun? I'm not sure which one, but... So, important to note, they cost a ton... They cost 500 energy to shoot, and they're incredibly expensive, and they cost a ton of energy just to build. 20K, by the way. So they're a very expensive unit, but if you get a critical mass of them, well... It's quite a satisfying experience. Yeah, a bunch of atomic bombers. The bot lane has finally pushed through. What am I looking at here? Alright, if Flynn watches this in the future, I would argue that 21 construction bots is a few too many cooks in the kitchen. When it comes to advanced air constructors, they can stack up. But the construction bots have a tendency to trip over one another. And that is why I'll usually see players building a ton of air constructors. Oh, that was a bit greedy there. Trying to get that spy bot in. So many snipers. But the screamer's knocking him out of the sky. But enough bombers get through. Right? How did that fusion live? How much? Yeah. Honestly, didn't take that much damage. So it's at this moment, when it looks like we've broken all the way through, that suddenly the Titans show up. Somehow, Titans appeared. Shadow Ninja is 13k energy production, so. There's some atomic bombers on the ground. But unfortunately, well, gets through the chain reaction. Ooh. Even if the EMPs land there and the rattlesnakes don't end up doing critical damage, without construction turrets, the gantry is just not going to produce units that quickly. Ooh. There goes the neighborhood. So, not a particularly flashy game from me, but I thought it was a good example of how important it is just hold. Oh, don't worry about winning, just not losing, depending on the situation. I think in the midline, just not losing is your key job. And you are kind of dependent on the other players doing theirs, but unfortunately or fortunately, it's a team game. Oh my god. I see why this game sometimes gets flagged as factorial. The grunts running through. Oh, those are pawns, actually. Getting a little trapped by the maze of What is going on here? It's a mess. Actually, what is going on? Are they trying to get out and the pathfinding's not working? They're on patrol? Then what have you done? Wait, no, they're not even on... No, they can't get through. They're tripping on the wind turbine. There are too many wind turbines. Yeah, this is probably a few too many. Like 1,000 on the screen right now. My god. Meanwhile, Spybot's finally landing on some of this. Thing is, well, the one thing we're kind of missing... Oh yeah, I'm getting some shurikens as well. The shurikens, snipers do not have... Actually, I'm not sure if they have anti-air capability, but either way, they fire so slowly, the shurikens can easily overwhelm them. So using the shurikens with to spread them out and then using the fight command, I found to be the most successful. And that can temporarily disable some of the snipers. And allow the rest of the team to push through. My god. They're still trying. They're gathering more pawns in the great maze of turbines. Oh. Looks like we had a direct move command. They're still struggling. Fat boy's blasting. I think welder sniper is the kind of, not really the equivalent, but the tier 2 version of the Fiend Sheldon for Cortex. It's a lot more expensive, but it has a lot more stopping power as well. Whereas the Fiend Sheldon is kind of like your early tier 2, the welder sniper is more like a tier 2.5 option. Usually you use hounds for Armada beforehand out of the bot lab, but they are at best a temporary solution. Oh wait, no, this was Pamabama there with the wind turbines. It's beautiful / terrible. Well, looks like we just had a chain reaction there. And he's got, oh, he's only got 14k. It's Flynn who has 19k. Flynn has invested in some of those. Yeah, these are, at some point, you have to just give up and accept there's gonna be a chain reaction if you get hit. But I think a pretty solid example of holding the midline, really focused on vision and fallback positions. Yeah, I don't think in no way, obviously, was I the MVP of that game there, but it does end up being a pretty decent. I wanted to go back. If you don't touch anything for like 30 seconds after the game ends, it'll cut to menu, which I just learned there. Again, I've relearned this a few times, so we don't get to do a full game overview. But hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully a little bit of extra knowledge there. People seem to be enjoying the commentary on the games, even though I'm just kind of throwing whatever comes to mind out. Nothing specific to learn, but a lot to do. So, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Hope I made your day a little bit better. I'll see you next time. Good luck, have fun. Stay unreasonable.